It's uncovered. It's the Midas Touch Network. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. Together we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the corporate media. We have a lot to talk about. There are less than 2 weeks until voting day, Ron. I think, what are we, 13 days away now? I mean, this has come around very fast. How you feel? Maybe I should ask, just before we get into the clips and the analysis, how are you feeling right now? Because a lot of people are feeling it quite badly.
Well, since this is my job, I'm feeling like I'm not sleeping very much anymore.
Tell me about it.
I'll tell you, I told the guys the other day, I had this crazy dream that Trump was president the other day, and they locked up Jordy. Jordy was on trial, and I went to go watch, and he was sentenced to 47 years. So I think the 47 was in my head because of Trump, the 47th president. And that, my trial was coming up next, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get out of the country and flee. So that's basically how is it going? That's pretty much how it's going.
Yeah, I was dreaming of bedding down in the British consulate. So we're all
working 16 hours a day. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. Okay, well, listen, let's get into the meat of it. Now, we did say, and I should kind of caveat this conversation with that, we predicted that Donald Trump would become not just more unhinged in these last few weeks leading up to the election, but more desperate. And I think that is actually coming true. We're hearing the kind of language, and I'm referring to things like, using the military against American citizens, for example. And as we're going to talk about today, this news that, he was praising generals from Hitler's regime and saying that, he needed Hitler-style generals. I mean, this is nuts. And to normalize it and to not call it out would be foolish. And I was very pleased to see that earlier Kamala Harris did call it out, including the fascism word, which is a word that rarely gets used by people in senior leadership roles. But maybe we should start with this news about the kind of release of this news of John Kelly, who was his former chief of staff, of course, who's a former general himself. There were a lot of rumors about what Kelly overheard and what Kelly said that never really kind of came out because Kelly never came out and said it himself. But now it turns out there were tapes.
Yeah, I mean, what Trump did in 15 and 16 was a very calculated strategy, and that was to discredit the media completely. The whole fake news thing, they're all liars, and getting his entire political party, really, the Republican Party, who always had, I think Republicans always felt like the media was a little bit biased and leftist and things like that, but nothing like the way they feel about it now, which is basically Trump has convinced them that nothing they say is real. And so when these first stories first came out, 2 years ago, about the suckers and losers and all this stuff, I knew that they weren't going to believe it because, they might believe it if they heard it directly from John Kelly's mouth and saw him saying it, but some of them would. But they're not going to believe it if a reporter comes forward, Bob Woodward was the first one, and says, John Kelly told this to me.
Right.
That has no impact, and it can't be used in ads or anything. So I've been beating the drum for a long time. The only way that this is ever going to really have impact is if we get this on tape, where you can see their face or hear their voice, and we finally have that now from Kelly.
And this is also true of things that Trump says. When you present Trump supporters with things that Trump has said that are outrageous, they're like, he never said that.
Right.
You literally have to play the tape. So, there is form here. Let's take a quick look at how this was reported by CNN.
He basically said to you that those who died for America on the battlefield were losers and suckers, and he said it more than once.
Yes, but he would say it would always, something else would get him going off at times again, McCain. But he never could wrap his arms around why people would serve the country in uniform. What was in it for them? That was the general theme.
I mean, it's not shocking because we knew this was coming, but to have a senior military person who is now kind of working or formerly working as Trump's chief of staff, to have to kind of even retell this story Must have been very hard for John Kelly as a military person, and you yourself as a former Marine. I'm sure you can shed some light on this. To be around people, especially a president who has no respect for people who give their life in service, this is as low as it goes.
No, you hit on a good point there, because I have been beating this drum for 2 years that Kelly needs to go on camera.
Yeah.
He still hasn't. I still think he might at the last minute. It'd be a hell of an October surprise if he does it like next week. But at least we got this. At least we hear him talking, so we don't have to take a reporter's word for it anymore. But I did get some pushback from some vets who are not, MAGA people, who have basically said, look, man, we don't do that. Generals don't do that. They don't talk to the media. They don't get involved in politics. It's always been a strict thing, that code. Now they're allowed to when they're no longer on active duty. So he could, but it's just something that is just bad form. It's just not done. And so I think Kelly being, a 4-star Marine general for 30-something years, I think it was just really, really hard for him to break that code of silence, especially since, look, he's still a Republican. I mean, he was Trump's chief of staff. So it's not like he's out there like a Kamala supporter, I mean, for all we know, he may still even be voting for Trump. We don't know. So I think it was really, really hard for him to do it. I think it's still hard for him to do it. But I think there were enough people in his ear the last few weeks that convinced him that, look, this has to go public.
And I've been reading, it's a long article, but I've been reading this article in the Atlantic that basically talks about, Trump and his position on a lot of these things. His idea for the military was, military parades. He wanted to be very much like the dictators that he looked up to in North Korea and in Russia and in China. And, no one does military parades better than those countries with their weapons. And he wanted to do this. He wanted to do it up Pennsylvania Avenue, for goodness sake.
Sure.
And it was people like John Kelly, that actually prevented not just parades, but a whole lot worse too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much corroboration behind this story when you really think, when you put it in the full context of that, wanting the military parades, the statements that Mattis gave, that that Milley has given, that Esper has given, Pence. I mean, there's so much corroboration from other people. The statements he's made on video about John McCain, which are very, very similar to what Kelly is saying. Yeah. So it's not like you have to believe. I mean, look, if I was prosecuting this case, and I was a criminal lawyer for 29 years, I mean, there's so much circumstantial evidence here. There's so many witnesses. There's so many pieces that you could put together, and you would present all that to a jury. And then the defendant would say, no, I never said that. Well, no one's going to believe you at that point. The only one who's going to believe him is the MAGA cultists. But, their reaction has been varying degrees, attacking Kelly, saying, I don't believe this happened. He's a disgruntled employee, one thing after another, or he betrayed confidences, or just the general reaction of like, this is all old news. You guys have rolled this stuff out before, and, it's all nonsense. So.
The Atlantic article talks about the notion that Trump looked up to Adolf Hitler and the way that Hitler had control over his generals. And if Hitler said anything, that the generals would just fall in line. And John Kelly, sorry, I keep getting these two mixed up. John Kelly had to make the point to him that you can't say stuff like that. Like you can never say that Hitler was good at anything, because he was like, oh, well, he did improve the German economy. Trump comes out with this, and John Kelly had to make the point that but he used that economy to then execute 6 million Jews. I mean, this is the insanity of Donald Trump. It's like he is the worst example of humanity. I was thinking this because, like a Holocaust denier, as an example, I'm not saying Trump is, but a Holocaust denier is pretty much as low as it gets. And this kind of stuff is very much in that ballpark as well. The way that Trump refers to not just the military, but to history He has no idea. He even asked John Kelly, from the article, who were the good guys in the First World War. He didn't know. Kelly had to say, well,
right.
anybody who was aligned with America. He didn't know.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'd like to give him a quiz to ask him in World War I who was on which side. Yeah,
right.
That'd be tricky for him. I don't think he could get it right at all. But because there were some different countries that from World War II in World War I, they were on so like Italy and Russia. They're different.
Yeah, there was some crossover, but
there was some crossover. He wouldn't get that. But the bigger thing is going back and looking at the context of why he was upset with his generals.
Yeah.
Was because they were telling him you can't do certain things.
Exactly.
That crazy shit that he wanted to do. They were saying, whether it was Mattis or Milley or Kelly, they were saying, no, you can't do that, sir. Milley has talked about this, that he wanted to use U.S. troops on American protesters. He wanted to call in the Army, the Marines, and which is illegal, and to use them on U.S. civilians, which is illegal. And so they told him no. And so that's the context of what he's saying. He's saying, like, I need generals like they had in Nazi Germany, where we could use the military on our people. And these guys kept telling me no. And here's what he's also saying. And next time, I'm going to make sure that the most senior generals in charge of the armed forces are going to be those kind of generals.
And that's why nobody in their right mind would vote for Donald Trump this time around, because we have this information, we have this knowledge, the warnings, the alarms have been sounded. And if you still think that Donald Trump is the right man to be commander-in-chief, leader of in control of the armed forces and the nuclear codes, after the way he has conducted himself, his lack of knowledge, but also this whole retribution storyline, then, be careful what you wish for. We do actually have a clip of him being asked about his defense secretary saying that he was the most dangerous person ever to America. This was actually on Fox News, surprisingly. Let's see how he responded.
General Jim Mattis, who was your Secretary of Defense, has now joined General Mark Milley, who was your Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in saying, this is their quote, you are the most dangerous person ever. I assume you'd like to respond.
Well, they were not my cup of tea. They were woke. You know that. They were not great generals, in my opinion. I was asking them advice. I didn't agree with the advice. Look at the advice that Milley gave to Biden on Afghanistan. Move the soldiers out first. No, you have to move the soldiers out last. I don't respect them as soldiers. I never did. I fired them both.
I don't respect them as soldiers. These are four-star generals. I never did. Aside from the fact, right? Yeah. Aside from the fact that none of what he said made sense anyway. Like, he cannot complete a sentence. That was all over the place, and yet he's in the polls, is neck and neck with Kamala Harris.
Yeah. So Jim Mattis, whose nickname in the military was Mad Dog, is a woke general, right? And John Kelly, who's a 4-star Marine general, is woke, right? This is what we're supposed to believe. He didn't respect their service, is what he just said in that clip also. And then he finished it off with a lie. He said he fired both of them. Well, first of all, Mattis, he did not fire Mattis. Mattis resigned in protest because of Trump's behavior. And as we know, Milley was never fired. Milley served right through the end of the Trump administration into the Biden administration and then retired a couple years later. This is how can you sit there on Fox News and say, I fired these two guys when, like, the whole world knows he didn't fire either one of them?
Well, because it's on Fox News and there's never going to be any pushback. That's why.
Yeah, I'd give Kurtz, but you can also tell there Howard Kurtz, as asking those questions, is like afraid to even ask the question. He's looking down. He won't even look at Trump.
But what is this about fear with Donald Trump? Because this is a theme, isn't it? That it's not even just the right-wing networks that are afraid of him. You know, the legacy networks, the major networks, the NBC, CBS, ABC, they also are terrified of him. And, you know, he doesn't have a hold over them in any way, aside from the fact that he's claiming he'll withdraw their broadcasting licenses if they don't fall in line. But you know, I don't think journalists are worried about that particularly empty threat. But what is it about Donald Trump, who is nothing but a kind of man baby? Why does he have such power over people? What, you know, how many journalists do you know that have actually held their own in front of him? Very few.
Yeah, because he's a bully. You know, he's intimidating. He's a bully. If he doesn't like the way you treated him, he's going to sick his mob on you after the fact. He's going to post about you on social media. You'll start getting death threats. Your spouse will start getting death threats. That's all part of the gig. So I guess it's easier to sort of take the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been very few. I mean, Jonathan Swan was one.
Yeah. Even the chap from Bloomberg the other day.
Leslie Stahl did a good interview of him years ago.
Yeah.
Brett Baer last year did one good interview of him. The rest of his interviews of Trump have been terrible. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. There's been like three good interviews of him, you know, 3 or 4.
But it's still not journalism, you know? I mean, I want to exclude Jonathan Swan from that because I thought that was a great interview. But the journalism that we deserve as a country facing the threat of fascism is still absent. And that is very worrying. You know, there's so much coverage in our bubble, in our kind of left-leaning, progressive, pro-democracy bubble. There's plenty of coverage, and people recognize that democracy does not last forever and requires everyone to take part. But in the right-wing sphere, where you have your fingers in pies, a lot of people have absolutely no concept that this could be a threat to their own freedom as well.
No, no, they really don't. I mean, they don't see it. Their view of Trump is completely different. But, you know, I think this particular story, you know, of course, all the MAGA people are like, this is old news. This isn't going to move the needle. Right. Well, you know, there's that one remaining block that is the undecided voter. And I think the Harris campaign just talked about this the other day, and I saw their polls. Right around 55% of the undecided are these Nikki Haley voters, these people who voted for Haley. They said, we either won't vote for Trump, or we're going to stay home, or we're going to vote none of the above, or we're not sure if we're going to vote for Harris. And see, this is the kind of stuff that does reach those particular voters, because a lot of those voters say what they don't like. You know, what they don't like about Trump is the McCain stuff, you know, all the character stuff. A lot of them are evangelicals. A lot of them are Mormons who aren't comfortable with his personal behavior, and they're not comfortable with January 6th. So this is the group that the Harris campaign is really making a play for hard now. That's why she was campaigning with Liz Cheney the last couple days, and all the Republicans for Harris. And so I think that this really helps with that particular sliver of voters.
Do you think that the Harris campaign is doing all the right things just 13 days out from the election? Do you
mostly,
as you see it? I mean, because what we don't want to happen is to come out the other side of this and then throw a whole load of criticism at the campaign and say they weren't on it, and make, you know, because Hillary Clinton made a whole bunch of mistakes not campaigning in those swing states. Yeah, for sure.
I would critique Hillary's campaign more than Harris's, because I think the critiques would be like, I wish that, you know, she had more time, because I think the last few weeks she's really come into her own, and which is incredible that she's been able to do that in such a short window of time. I wish she had more of a window, you know, to get her legs under her. I think also after the whole debacle with what happened with Biden, they were way too overprotective of her in the first month.
Yes.
And they didn't book her, you know, not having her do interviews, press conferences. They didn't book her on a lot of stuff.
So they lost some time. They lost a couple of weeks.
They lost time because they didn't, I think a lot of them they were either shell-shocked after the Biden debate thing, or they just didn't have confidence in her. I don't know what it was, but I think what she's shown is that they should have had more confidence in her, because she's really kicked ass. I mean, I think she's been a great campaigner.
She's pulling out all the stops, and that speech that she made outside her Washington residence earlier was brilliant, and for me will be the defining announcement of this last 2 weeks, and hopefully it will ricochet around the country, because she couldn't have made it any clearer about the threat of Donald Trump. And that's really, for me, that's the most important thing about this. Look, it's so crazy, isn't it, that the US economy is doing pretty well, and to all intents and purposes, the immigration is being dealt with as best as can be dealt with. I think they could speak more about what it is that they're doing at the southern border and things like that. But, it's not the crisis that Republicans would claim that it is. And obviously Trump vetoed the immigration bill, which, didn't help matters. But ultimately, this is Trump's election to lose. And I think that is becoming more and more clear in these last couple of weeks. I just want him to keep talking, Ron. The more he talks, the less chance he has of winning.
Yeah, every appearance is worse. Everyone is, everyone that he does gets worse, and he says the crazier things, as we're going to cover some of these crazy things here on this show that he's been saying. And I think Harris gets better and better every appearance, and he gets worse and worse as he becomes more unhinged. She's got her CNN town hall tonight. This weekend, she's got her huge rally in Georgia with Bruce Springsteen. Obama's out there now almost every day. Yeah. Michelle Obama is doing a huge rally with Harris in Michigan this weekend. So I think the next 4 or 5 days are really going to be impactful, I think, for the Harris campaign with what they have planned. And
I saw Will Ferrell on the streets of New York, and that can only be a good thing.
Oh, really? Is he?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was out in the Kamala
Trump
t-shirt.
Focused on like Coachella and Madison Square Garden. Like, what's that all about?
I know.
Like, I don't know what he's doing.
Well, but my theory on that is that he thinks he's got this in the bag. And so therefore he thinks that he doesn't need any more votes in these states that he will win comfortably, including swing states. So now he's going for some of these traditionally Democrat states. And he thinks that he could turn them. I think it's the ego.
His campaign people are not telling him that. And I think that's part of the problem. I think, if he does lose, what we're gonna I've said this before a long time ago. I'm waiting for those tell-all books to be written by Jason Miller, Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, Steve Chung, when they all start trashing each other and trashing Trump, because if he loses, that is going to happen. They're all going to be pointing fingers at each other, and then we're going to really find out. And I think the central theme of all of that dirt is going to be that Trump never listened to their advice.
Well, this is the point that I'm making, is that I think that he's calling the shots at a level that is probably making his campaign very uncomfortable, including let's go to Coachella. Yeah. Because
he's just done so many things that I know there's no way they would have wanted him to do, but he's like that, like Coachella, like Madison Square Garden. I mean, you think about Madison Square, there's zero win here because it cost a fortune to rent that arena for a Saturday night.
Well, he's not going to pay.
And now, they're saying that he sold it out. He sold out because people online have signed up for tickets or whatever. But filling Madison Square Garden is not easy to do. So let's assume that they're thinking it's sold out because of a bunch of Democrats went on and registered. And then he shows up at Madison Square Garden 4 days before the election, and it's half empty. Yeah. How terrible is he going to look? He's going to look like a fool. And I believe that that's going to happen. So there's just so many of these decisions that he's making, whether it's picking J.D. Vance. I don't think any of them wanted J.D. Vance to be picked as the running mate. He just ignores their advice and goes with these other people. Do you think that they want Laura Loomer hanging around? Or do you think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is speaking at his event today? Do you think that they really want her there? No. This is him calling the shots.
But this is how he ran and runs the Trump organization. And that was the only business model that he knew of. And that was the model he took into the White House in 2017. And that was when he felt frustrated because there were all these civil servants and chiefs of staff and people that had to, that weren't prepared to kind of do everything that he wanted. He had to limit himself. And I think that's why he's leaning so far the other way now about having full autonomy and or as Kamala Harris refers to it, as absolute power. That's what Trump wants. Let's look at let's look at a clip of him in Doral, which is his, one of his golf courses, I think, isn't it, where he was talking about solar energy. He's now added this to the wind turbines that he calls windmills. I mean, you literally couldn't make this stuff up. Here he is.
A solar field the other day that looked like it took up half the desert. I never saw anything like it. It's all steel and glass and wires and it looks like hell. And you see rabbits, they get caught in it. And for the environmentalists, it's just terrible. I like, some applications where you have it on a roof or you have it on something. But I'm looking at solar fields that are like miles and miles of just, and what it does to your desert areas or the areas that you're putting, it's just crazy. We have stuff right under the ground. Natural gas. We have things that we.
Yeah, you got to sweep the floors of those deserts, Ron. Got to sweep those desert floors. I mean, I should just mention something here. I remember Elon Musk saying that if we had a solar farm that was 100 square miles, it would power all of America's electricity needs.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know much about it, but all I can say is Trump. There is no form of renewable clean energy that Trump likes.
No.
He finds a reason to be against everything, whether it's hydroelectric, nuclear, wind, solar. He's against it all. His only answer when it comes to energy policy is drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. The problem is that we're drilling more than ever before. We're producing more than ever before. And we're selling all of the oil companies, the domestic oil companies are selling it all overseas, the extra oil. And that's what's going to happen if Trump boosts oil production, natural gas production in the United States, all these companies are going to do is use that to sell overseas, because that used to be illegal, but that was lifted. That the cap was lifted on the law was lifted that prevented U.S. companies from selling U.S. oil to foreign countries. And once that was lifted, that's it. They're selling it all in other around the world. So this is not going to solve the problem, and this is not a long-term solution. And as we know, he doesn't believe in climate change either. You ask him about that, and he talks about, oceanfront property in Michigan. So this is a guy who's profoundly anti-science, which also is like so baffling that Elon Musk, who disagrees with Trump on all of what we just talked about, including EVs, because Trump's anti-EV, is backing him, because the bottom line is Elon Musk's racism is greater, is more important to him than the science.
Well, he also doesn't need any more money, and what he's probably into is government contracts, right? He's already has hundreds of government contracts, not to mention the way NASA have been offloading stuff to SpaceX. And if he comes into a Trump administration in this role that he's been promised, where he's in charge of purchasing or something,
government efficiency is what
efficiency.
That's what he calls it. Yeah.
Every senator is going to be driving a Tesla paid for by the government. I mean, that's what we're going to end up with. It'll be a Tesla branded administration. And I think that Musk is as dangerous as Donald Trump. And I'd say that they are both as dangerous as J.D. Vance as well. And that, it's like a love triangle of hatred. And it worries me.
Yeah. I mean, Vance and Musk are two peas in a pod. That's exactly. You see, I think deep down, like, Musk is pretending that he likes Trump, but I don't think he really does. I think he would much rather see Vance in there And I think that there's a lot of people that have that in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
That like, oh, the old man, he's never going to make it through a term. Plus, he can't run again. So I think they're all thinking it's going to be Vance.
But this is worth us talking about for a moment, because I saw a clip this morning of Kevin Roberts. Maybe you saw the same one, basically saying that
I didn't.
Their money was on J.D. Vance to be the vice president. And Kevin Roberts is, of course, from the Heritage Foundation, the authors of Project 2025. And, we discussed last week J.D. Vance converting to Catholicism in 2019, which kind of, puts him into that kind of Christian nationalist camp that Kevin Roberts subscribes to. And then, there is a theory out there that Trump is like the Trojan horse, get us in there, and then we'll do away with Trump, and JD is our man, who's far more eloquent, far more educated, and can actually probably convince more people of these extremist policies and normalize them.
I think that most of those guys, that's what they want. They would prefer Vance over Trump, because see, what they don't like about Trump is that he's so undisciplined and unfocused.
Yeah.
They want somebody like a DeSantis or a Vance who can actually implement the things in a policy perspective that they want done. And they don't want someone like Trump, who's like, he might go out to unveil one of their new policy proposals and might start talking about Kim Jong-un or mental illness in Wales or Hannibal Lecter, and the focus gets lost. And he doesn't follow through on things. And plus he's transactional. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Whereas like Vance isn't going to worry about that, So sure, they backed DeSantis in the primary, a lot of these guys. And, Musk did. A lot of the tech oligarchs, they were backing DeSantis because they thought he's more disciplined than Trump. He can get this stuff into policy. And Trump is too undisciplined and all over the place and unreliable.
Well, Trump's been a useful idiot for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. So it was Putin wanting him installed, been working on him for a while. I mean, this sounds so conspiratorial, but if you read the Mueller report, it really isn't. And this is the point, is that Trump doesn't know. Trump thinks that he is controlling Putin.
Yeah.
And he is controlling Kim Jong, and it's completely the opposite way around.
And they let him think that.
Yes. Yeah. They're just playing him. He has no idea. Maybe it's a good time to mention Leonard Leo. Do you want to explain who Leonard Leo is for those who don't know? Because this is an unelected person who actually has had a huge amount of power in American politics.
Yeah, so Leonard Leo is probably the best fundraiser out there among Republicans for the last 20 years. There are other guys that are good fundraisers, Harlan Crow, these Sheldon Adelson when he was alive, that could raise you a big chunk of change. But he's the best. And so he is been the head of the Federalist Society. And basically what he has done is he has taken all of these hundreds of millions of dollars that he's raised from big donors. And, he was originally just focused on getting conservative right-wing judges appointed to the judiciary, working hand in glove with Mitch McConnell. See, there isn't any federal judge that's been appointed by a Republican in the last 20 years that wasn't vetted by Leonard Leo. Like it's not possible. So, if you're like a lawyer and you have aspirations to be on the Supreme Court or a federal judge, you've got to join Federalist Society and you've got to get in tight with Leonard Leo. So he's been the gatekeeper for that. But in recent years, he's expanded his operation and he started to fund think tanks and different Republican groups and organizations that come up with right-wing policy. But then what he's done just recently in a new interview this week was he talked about how he's frustrated with that and that he wants to change gears now, and he wants to finance people who are more activists that are going to be sent out into the entertainment industry, into the media to get jobs to train people who are instead of just coming up with ideas and writing policy papers, they're actually going to go out into these institutions and transform them. So he wants to recruit those people, train those people, and send them out into these institutions to transform them. And he's got about $1 billion in the bank to be able to do it.
Let me read the quote that you posted in this new interview. Federalist Society Chair Leonard Leo explains his new plan to crush liberal dominance in American culture by infiltrating the press, infiltrating entertainment with right-wing culture warriors he's recruiting and financing. Now, this is obviously... This all ties in with the Supreme Court, doesn't it? Because Leonard Leo is very much responsible for those 3 members of the Supreme Court that Donald Trump installed before he got beat by Joe Biden. And this all connects into the reversal of Roe and the reversal of Chevron and all of these kind of major cases that this new far-right Christian nationalist MAGA Republican Supreme Court is responsible for. That is the amount of power that Leonard Leo has, right?
And let me give you an example of how this works, like exactly what he's trying to do here. Let's take our boy out in Oklahoma. So Leonard Leo wants to overturn the Lemon line of cases, separation of church and state. This is his goal, okay? It's the same thing with Roe and Dobbs. So how do you do that? Well, you need to get a school, somebody in charge of the schools in a particular state to start implementing all of this religious curriculum to create a test case to take to the Supreme Court. Well, that doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to go find some nut job to be in charge of the schools in a state like Oklahoma. I mean, you could win that with $100,000. It doesn't cost very much. So you find the right guy, you get him elected, like they have in Oklahoma. And then he starts mandating Bibles in schools and financing Catholic churches, knowing Leonard Leo and Walters know this is going to get shot down in the courts. It's going to get torpedoed. They all know this. But now what they're going to do is now that Walters has done his part of the deal, now the lawyers take over and they work their way up. And now the judges that he got appointed get to hear those cases.
Right.
And then his Supreme Court justices get to hear those cases.
So it's a long game.
And it's a long game. It takes 2-3 years, and he's doing that with government regulations, environmental regulations, immigration laws. It's a long-term comprehensive plan. They're playing the long game, and it seems to be working.
You were a Republican much longer than you have been a Kamala Harris supporter, right?
Yeah, I'll say.
One thing that I still struggle with, and maybe you can offer some insight, is, to me, with my snowflake thinking, it just presents as evil. Somebody who doesn't care for the planet and who wants to drill, baby, drill, and who wants to take away people's rights and impose, take away religious freedom and impose an extreme version of Christianity upon the entire nation. To me, it is evil. It's not even just a political ideology. It goes beyond that. Where does this come from?
I can tell you, like, it comes in the college years. It comes very early on.
Yeah.
Where, you take any issue. I can remember in the 80s, of course, apartheid, let's take in South Africa. So there's the standard narrative of what media, the movies are saying about what is happening in South Africa and what is happening with Mandela and Steve Biko and all these different people. But when you're a Republican college student, you're conservative, as I was, you're introduced to an alternative version. You're given books, you're exposed to things that say, no, Mandela, he was a criminal. He was a terrorist. He did this, he did that, and you're exposed to this sort of alternate version of history. And same thing with climate change. At first you're presented with like, well, okay, maybe there's climate change, but it's not caused by man. It's caused by all these other and you're given all these talking points, like it could be caused by this. It could be caused. So, and it's attractive to you because for people who want to kind of especially when they're young, swim against the current because you're like, well, that helps me carve out the opposite position of what everyone else thinks, the conventional wisdom. So if you're somebody that likes to be a little different and likes to argue, a lot of this stuff is attractive. So you take that, my experience as a young conservative in the 80s and the 90s, and you add the internet to it, which we did not have. You add social media then to it, and it just snowballs and mushrooms into this disinformation sphere,
I tried to interview a couple of years ago a former Newsmax host who was a student of Liberty University. And I experienced exactly what you're describing. This kind of young guy was so indoctrinated into the opposite values of everything that I considered normal. And it was impossible to get through to him. It was impossible to make any headway.
Yeah.
Because there was no rational thinking or critical thinking. It was all the indoctrination that he had grown up with. And, these...
like Supreme Court, I can remember reading Robert Bork's book as a young law student, because, and Thomas Sowell for economics, or Charles Murray. Now, a lot of these people I would never agree with now. Yes. But back then, you take it as gospel, and like I said, it's very appealing when you're somebody who wants to be different, maybe wants to swim against the stream, and doesn't mind mixing it up, wants to debate.
Right.
Because when you're in college, it's true, most people are liberal, and so being a conservative in college is kind of fun if you're not afraid of arguing and debating, and so you need that ammunition that they give you. But then as time goes on and you learn more and you learn more critical thinking skills, you realize that so much of what you're being fed was a lie. And Stuart Stevens, who was George W. Bush's campaign manager, wrote a fantastic book about this whole subject. And the name of the book is called "It Was All a Lie."
Right. And some of these people, I'm thinking of Victor Davis Hanson, for example, another of these supposed scholars who talks with great authority about history. Yeah. And yet it is a completely rewritten history. It doesn't bear any resemblance to the truth that I was educated with or have read about myself, or that the whole of Europe is teaching. It's so weird to me. Yeah. And it's compelling.
Like DeSantis is a disciple of his, and so you listen to DeSantis talk about history, it's basically like listening to that guy.
Right. No relation, by the way. Okay, listen, we have to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and talk more, or uncover more, hopefully, including an announcement from Steve Bannon's daughter. I didn't even know he had a daughter, so we'll do that next here on Uncovered. Have you had difficulty focusing lately? Things like parenting pressures, work challenges, school commitments, or just personal drama can all wreak havoc on your ability to stay focused and productive. Well, if this sounds like you, I know something that could make a real difference. Calm. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Calm knows that everyone faces unique challenges in their daily lives, and mental health isn't about a one-size-fits-all solution. That's why Calm offers a wide range of content to help you navigate life's ups and downs, with meditations to help you work through anxiety and stress, boost your focus, build healthier habits, and take better care of your physical well-being. Expert-led talks designed to help you handle grief, improve self-esteem, care of relationships, and much more. Calm puts the tools you need right in your pocket and can help you dedicate just a few minutes each day to live a happier, healthier life. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/uncovered. Go to calm.com/uncovered for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/uncovered. Breaking news. Cook Unity is the #1 meal delivery service in the USA, and it's easy to understand why. With award-winning chefs, local fresh farm ingredients, and vibrant flavors delivered directly to your door. Go to cookunity.com/uncovered or enter code uncovered before checkout for 50% off your first week. The chefs you see on TV and in five-star kitchens are the chefs that make your Cook Unity meals. They're made with humanely raised meat and organic ingredients where possible, plus no cleanup or meal planning. The meals are delivered fully cooked, just heat in as little as 5 minutes. Enjoy restaurant-quality meals for a fraction of the price, with subscriptions from just $11 a meal. The menus are updated weekly and new chefs are always joining the team, so you'll always find new favorites. Eating well is easy with Cook Unity, affordable food crafted by award-winning chefs delivered to your door. Go to cookunity.com/uncovered or enter code uncovered before checkout for 50% off your first week. That's 50% off your first week by using code uncovered or going to cookunity.com/uncovered. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. Before we go to Steve Bannon's daughter, why don't we talk about McDonald's? Because they have a new employee by the looks of it, Ron, and this has ricocheted around the US in terms of media coverage. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. This is Donald Trump supposedly showing up to work at a McDonald's, working the fries machine, passing food out to passers-by through the second window, not the first window. They didn't trust him with the cash. There's a caveat to this, though, isn't it? And that is that nothing is what it seems. Take it away, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about this a couple of years ago before we formed our Midas team, of my plan to deal with this kind of stuff during this upcoming election, and how I wanted to deal with it. And, we have implemented that plan in just about every Trump event to show, because we know that everything he does is fake and staged and phony and paid people and all that. But there was never anybody who ever proved that, who ever dug into it and showed it. So, what we have done in event after event, whether it's the Harlem Bodega, where we used facial recognition to identify the people there and to show that none of them were from Harlem, and they were all from the New York Young Republican Club that were brought in there, astroturfed in there. Or we identified the random black woman in the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta who went up and gave Trump a hug as a Republican paid operative. And we've done, or whether it's union leaders for Trump in Michigan, auto workers, which we identified as non-union or non-union shops. So this is something that we have done over and over again. And it's a plan. I mean, it's a plan that we have going into each event. So when he goes to this McDonald's, we're ready for it. I was talking about it hours before. I was telling the guys, today's McDonald's day. We got to be ready. This is what we're going to do. We're going to watch this. We're going to watch that. And we found, this thing from the owner that he put out to his customers, this little flyer where he told them that the whole place was going to be closed for the day, right? So that's the flyer that was put on the window of his business previously. And how we got that was through his social media pages, his Facebook page. We figured out the name of the owner, and then we found that and we posted it. So the point is that it's important that phase number one is the getting the truth of what's really happening. That's step one, and getting it out and getting the truth out there. Step two is dealing then with the backlash and disinformation of the Trump campaign, the pushback. And then step three is just the beclowning of the whole thing, getting it into the pop culture, getting it outside of the political sphere into different areas of social media through TikTok, through local news, but pushing it out of our little bubble. And that's a plan that we have followed, and we did it this time, because the narrative that the Trump team wanted from this was Trump went to work a shift at a busy McDonald's, and he was working side by side with their team, working the fryer, serving customers. That was their narrative that they wanted to present. Instead, what is the narrative now? That Trump went there, it was a clown show, it was closed for the day, all the customers were Trump supporters. They weren't real McDonald's customers. They rehearsed their scripts ahead of time. That restaurant, which we also brought out, had health code violations, repeated health code violations for not washing hands, not wearing hair, which is what Trump violated. So all of those kind of things are now in the public consciousness and the narrative from that event, and not what the Trump campaign wanted.
And the most important part of this exercise, which might seem like a whole lot of work, is that it's true. Everything that we are identifying is true. This is not us trying to rubbish Trump. This is not us making up false propaganda to spread. This is just posting the truth, the real story behind another Donald Trump publicity stunt. And I would contrast that with the authentic nature of Kamala Harris's visits when she goes places. They don't have to fake it with Kamala Harris. They don't have to bus in thousands of people or put 6 black people behind her when she's making a speech. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's true versus, you know, a kind of alternative reality.
So let's talk about the pushback, the backlash, the phase 2 part. That's where they're coming at us with, you guys are stupid. You know, of course, Secret Service has to secure the area.
Right. Convenient.
You know, this and that. Of course, all politicians stage. It's like, no. Okay, I agree with you on some of that. Like, yes, Secret Service needs to secure, but the way that they were trying to present this was a open, busy McDonald's restaurant that Trump went into. Okay. Not that it was closed for the entire day. It was shut down so Trump could play this kabuki theater, right? So that's an important point. And look, the Trump campaign never had anybody do this to them in 2016 or 2020. They got away with these lies, and because they never really had a group like us that just relentlessly followed them everywhere they go and out what is happening behind the scenes.
And then he wanted to go get his French fry certification pin, didn't he? And that clogged up a whole load of traffic around Asheville. So
another perfect example.
Right.
Another perfect example. He goes into Asheville, okay, to this disaster site, right? So we find some Facebook traffic of people that live in Asheville who are complaining that they're stuck in traffic. They can't get to their doctor's appointment. They can't get to schools. They can't get to their insurance adjuster. We find these things on Facebook and other places, TikTok. And we go, okay, everybody drop everything. And 3 or 4 of us are doing nothing but finding people in Asheville complaining about Trump. And then we marry that up with, okay, what is Trump doing? He's receiving a pin from a McDonald's franchise guy in that area, and they're talking about. And you look, the disaster site is in the background, and he's proudly holding up his McDonald's French fry certification pin. And while he's doing that, people are stuck in traffic. They can't for 5-6 hours. He blocked I-240 through Asheville, which is the only major highway through that. So these are the kinds of things that we have been doing as a Midas team, is showing things that aren't reported by mainstream media. What is happening behind the scenes when Trump does these staged fake events to the real people on the ground there? What is the impact his fakery has on their lives, and put the truth out?
Because truth is golden, Ron.
That's right.
Look, this guy is only good enough for McDonald's. Him getting that pin is like him at the inauguration. He was probably prouder of the McDonald's French fry pin. That is as far as his career should ever have gone. Now he's having to stage it, having got into that situation of pretending to be the president for 4 years. This is as good as we get. Like, this is the representative of the entire Republican Party, a guy that is barely good enough for the deep fat fryer. It's just remarkable to me that you and I are having to sit here week after week and analyze this moron, and that he takes up so many column inches, and wherever he goes, chaos is happening behind. Like in that image with him that is a perfect example of Donald Trump. The chaos behind, and him being completely distracted by something completely trivial.
Yep. We did it to him again at the funeral. Remember when he showed up in Arlington?
Yes.
And I got the picture of him with putting his thumbs up that I got from a right winger who was at the event. It didn't come from media,
right?
Putting his thumbs up. So yes, it's like piercing the narrative. Their campaign has this story they want to tell, and they have this bull in a china shop moron try and play the lead actor in their production.
Yeah.
And then we're showing what's behind the cameras, what's really happening here to everyone. And we're just constantly trying to destroy their narrative that they're trying to create, one right after the other. But yeah, you're right. The chaos behind them. And here's another little caveat I should tell you, because this goes way back to like 2010 with Trump, is that these guys have all figured out by now, like the way to get Trump to do something or to show up or say something is to give him an award, any kind of award, like a plaque, a trophy, like a medal, a ribbon, like those things. We talked about how he always wanted a Purple Heart.
Yeah.
Like that's the easiest way to get to Trump. And down in Sarasota, Florida, where I used to live, our local party chairman, who went on to become the state party chairman, figured that out like way back. I remember way back in 2010, he announced, I've got Donald Trump for our big annual Lincoln Day dinner. And this is like 15 years ago.
Is this the Man of the Year thing?
And I said, how the hell? First of all, how the hell did you get Trump to come to Sarasota, Florida for a dinner? Like, how did you pull that off? And he just laughed. And he says, I named him Statesman of the Year. Statesman of the Year. I'm like, Statesman of the Year? He's never even been to Sarasota. Like, how is he our Statesman of the Year? Like, he lives in New York. Like, what?
He can't resist it.
And sure enough, like that's how he got him to come to Sarasota. Was he couldn't get him, and then he came up with the idea, we're going to name you Statesman of the Year. Next thing you know, I'll be there.
Trump embodies all of these metaphors from the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain. And anything Emperor's New Clothes is one we hear all the time. And even, this kind of Truman Show. I feel like I'm living in Donald Trump's Truman Show.
Yeah.
Where wherever he goes, it is a faked scenario to make him feel good about himself and believe his own publicity.
He's the man. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And actually, it's the Handmaid's Tale. Like, that's what it's become, and that's what we're all having to live in, and that's what we will be faced with if he wins in 13 days' time. It's terrifying. I kind of feel like he doesn't even quite realize what's at stake because he's so self-absorbed that to him to joke about Hitler's generals and think that is normal for him, that's his baseline. And for the rest of us are outraged, and he just doesn't see it. The guy is a fruitcake.
Yeah, he's really a strange dude, and he's really easy to manipulate. Yeah, I mean, if this little McDonald's franchise owner in Asheville, North Carolina, can cause him to break off of his narrative, because look, his campaign people did not want to make this about his trip to Asheville, a disaster site, about McDonald's. No. Right? That was the day before. It's time to shift gears. This is supposed to be a somber, serious moment. And, next thing you know, he's proudly displaying a French fry pin in a disaster area. It's the same exact thing when he went to the disaster site of the train derailment in
East
Ohio.
Palestine. Yeah.
East Palestine, when he's like, have fun, everybody. And he's tossing waters. And he's
have a good time.
How's crime in this town? It's like, that's not what they
because he
wanted
thinks
from
it's
him.
all a show. He is a showman. He thinks. Did you see? I'm actually planning on making a video about it. Did you see that this marketing manager from The Apprentice kind of going public about his I mean, that to me we need to make a whole lot more of. The fact is that Donald Trump was like a nobody, and it was that show that gave him that kind of that shining star.
He was leveraged to the hilt and broke.
He was leveraged. And he was the only kind of millionaire businessman that they approached who was available
Yeah.
Nobody else had the time to do that show.
And who wanted to be in the
right.
spotlight.
Yeah.
Sure. They've said it, and we all know it's true. There's no President Trump without The Apprentice.
No. Okay, let's talk about Steve Bannon for a moment, because of course he was a very early member of Donald Trump's campaign team, and in the first time around, he was the one who wanted to sow the seed for chaos, and throw as much information into the mix as possible, and people won't know what to believe. Well, as we know, he went to prison. He actually went to prison over that fraudulent Build the Wall foundation or something that he created. Isn't that right? He kind of raised a whole bunch of money.
He was pardoned by Trump. He was about to go to trial, and he got pardoned.
Right. Yeah. So he is currently in prison. He should be out of prison, according to his daughter. She's saying that he's been denied early release. She said they're deliberately stalling his release in order to prevent such a key voice in the MAGAverse. Let's take a quick look.
My dad is eligible for early release under the First Step Act, which means that he should be out now. He submitted a document on August 29th, 2024, which was over 75 days ago, requesting early release. Now, you need over 30 days left in order for home confinement to be set up according to the Bureau of Prisons. And they waited until Friday to notify him that he was eligible under the First Step Act for early release to home confinement. So it's very clear to myself and many people in the War Room posse that their timing of this is no accident. They are deliberately stalling his release in order to prevent such a key voice in the MAGA movement from being behind the mic and out there and able to help secure an election for Donald J. Trump on November 5th.
I'm surprised she's not wearing 2 shirts and hasn't got 4 pens in her top pocket. See if that runs in the family. Didn't he defy a subpoena or something? Isn't that the reason why he's serving time right now?
I mean, he just didn't show up for his deposition because, he wanted to be defiant. He wanted to be, I'm not going to go along with the January 6th committee. I'm not going to do anything they want me to do. So, where all the other witnesses just showed up and either were evasive or took the fifth like Michael Flynn did, basically took the fifth to every question. Instead, Bannon and Navarro, they're 2 best friends, they're buddies, they do their show together all the time, decided that they were going to be different. They were going to be defiant, and they were just going to refuse to show up and see what happens and dare DOJ to prosecute them. And they got prosecuted, and they both went to prison. So, I thought that what was interesting, there's a few interesting things here, layers to this, which is, number one, when Bannon did go to prison, he was acting like this is no big deal. And I said, it is a big deal because Bannon is one of the principal organizers of the grassroots MAGA movement and getting them all fired up and getting them to show up at the polls and get out and do the sign waving and all that stuff. He's a mobilizer of the grassroots. So for him to take himself out of the game for the 4 most crucial months of this election and put himself in prison where he can't communicate with the outside world is really a stupid, foolish thing to do. And I don't think he really ever thought it was going to happen. I think they called his bluff. And so when you hear, and he acted like blasé about it when he went into prison, but you hear his daughter say how important it was for them to have him out. She said one of the most critical voices of the MAGA movement. So she gave the game away with that by conceding that this hurt them. Okay, that's number one. And number two, I can tell you that they just read on air this morning an email that Bannon sent them, sent to his daughter. So apparently his plan when he gets out on Tuesday with 1 week to go before the election is he's going to use this as like a campaign issue to win over the black male vote, because what he's going to do, you'll watch this happen. I'm telling you ahead of time. I'm breaking some news right here.
Right.
Is that he's going to come out guns blazing and he's going to talk about how the Biden-Harris administration discriminates against inmates in prison by denying them early release. And this affects black men disproportionately. disproportionately more, and so this is why they hate black men, and he thinks that him being denied early release, he's going to be able to use that as like a last minute campaign issue to try and shift some black male votes over to Trump.
Meanwhile, he's a multimillionaire. He created the Breitbart news network, didn't he?
Well,
he also
took it over. Yeah,
took it over.
He was created. Breitbart created it.
Breitbart created it, right? But he
died. He died.
Bannon was running it effectively.
Yeah,
and let's put it, all over the world. It's not just confined to the U.S.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that he was a early proponent of the deconstruction of the administrative state. Those are words that he would talk about, and that aligns with Project 2025. So, they're all in bed with each other.
And he hates Elon Musk. And so that's, for me, like, I'm always looking for wedge issues. And I got in a little argument last night with his daughter, and I just started popping clips of Bannon ripping Elon Musk because I was sort of taunting them that, like, I'm like, Bannon's going to get out and realize that Musk has taken his place in Trump's, Musk is now
Musk is the vice presidential candidate, isn't he?
He is now like Trump's Steve Bannon. So I was taunting them last night saying, like, Bannon's out, man. He blew it. He's gone. He's out of sight, out of mind. Musk has taken over. And they got all mad. And then I posted some clips of Bannon ripping Musk and all that. So we had some fun with that last night.
Musk has been making the headlines the last few days for all the wrong reasons, and that is that it appears that he is trying to buy Republican voters. And in Harrisburg, he handed $1 million check to a voter chosen supposedly at random from co-signers of his free speech and right to bear arms petition. And this is something that all the legal experts are pretty much in agreement with, to say that what he's doing is illegal. It is in defiance of campaign finance, or however this is graded. I mean, how is he getting away with this?
And the news broke right before we started the show that the Department of Justice has actually sent him a letter, basically a warning letter, saying, we've looked at what you've done. We've looked at the statutes. We think that what you're doing probably violates federal law. And this is very unusual. Usually the federal government doesn't kind of warn you that you're breaking the law before they do anything.
Well, he is white and wealthy, so he gets a warning letter.
Right.
If he was poor and black, he would have been like over the hood of his car by now.
And we know who this is coming from. This is coming from Merrick Garland, right? Yeah. So we already know Merrick Garland's going to give you like 9 warning letters before he does anything, right? So he told because this is you obviously can't offer any financial incentive whatsoever to anyone to vote. A lot of these states have passed laws you can't even hand out bottled water. So he thinks he's clever and slick and can work around laws like most oligarchs do. They don't think these laws apply to them. So he comes up with this cockamamie, like, no, you sign a petition and the petition says, basically like things that you would support Trump on, and you have to register to vote. You have to be registered to vote, and you have to show proof that you actually have cast a ballot in early voting. And then you're eligible for this $1 million lottery. And he's giving away $1 million prizes. And the DOJ has basically said, like, dude, you're not fooling anybody with this. Like, you're only doing this in a swing state, in a crucial swing state. And everything on your petition is like geared towards Trump, even though his name doesn't appear on it. Like, you're not fooling anybody. So it'll be interesting to see if Musk just defies them and just continues to do this every day. Because he also said that he was only going to be in Pennsylvania until this Monday, but I think he's still there. So,
well, because he hasn't got the results that he was looking for. And then there was that whole controversy about wasn't Musk's company like running the door knocking for the Trump campaign, and it turns out that a lot of the door knockers were abusing the GPS technology and making it look like they'd knocked on more doors when they hadn't. And that could actually unseat a huge part of Trump's campaign, because traditionally door knockers are volunteers or they're people from the campaign, but they are not paid to do canvassing. And so there's no incentive for them to get behind Donald Trump. They just want to get paid.
This is a huge difference between the two campaigns.
Yeah.
And the Harris campaign has talked about it. I mean, they put this army of volunteers, grassroots volunteers, to do this door knocking stuff in a year ago. The Biden Harris campaign did. These people have all been in place. They're all ready to go. They're all volunteers. The campaign has a well-financed ground game. The Trump campaign had nothing. They had nothing in Georgia. So this is why they were so desperate to get Brian Kemp to get on board, because Kemp has a ground organization in Georgia. So what Trump has to do is borrow other people's organizations, whether it's Charlie Kirk's Turning Point people or Elon Musk. Basically what Elon Musk is doing is hiring mercenary soldiers. Yeah. The problem is when you hire like these random people off the street for $15, $20 an hour, and they're paid like bonuses by the number of houses that they visit. And a lot of these people know how to scam the system. So yeah, the report is basically like Musk has been getting ripped off by these people. But the other thing is, like, what good does it do if you have somebody knocking on the door? Like, that person has to know what they're talking about and has to advocate for the campaign, for the candidate. And if you're just a hired person off the street with no training, you're not going to impress anybody when you knock on their door. You're actually going to aggravate them. And this is what happened in a lot of places, is you quickly figure out, like, wait, you're not even from my neighborhood. You're not even from my state. Wait, where are you from, son? You're from New York and you're here in Pennsylvania. What are you doing here? So it's much different when you have people from your town knocking on your door. I've worked on a million campaigns. Whenever you look for a volunteer door knocker, you want somebody who's actually lives in that neighborhood, right, to be your volunteer,
who believes it. Because it's
I'm your neighbor down the street,
yeah,
and I'm supporting so-and-so. Instead, they got people from other states.
But this is why Donald Trump's campaign is the Truman Show. And I've made a video about this, and that people can see. It's out on 5 Minute News. It'll be on my display today, where I've tried to explain the reason that they look neck and neck in the polls. And it's because the entire Donald Trump campaign is fake, including the Republican funding of a lot of these polls, to give the impression that he is popular when he's not. Because you cannot win elections with people for hire doing door knocking. You cannot win elections with fake McDonald's publicity stunts. It's inauthentic. It is not how you win elections. You can't lie your way through the entire campaign and expect to win. But I don't think they are expecting to win. I think that they're expecting to contest the election no matter what the result. And if they lose, they'll be like, well, the polls said we were neck and neck, so obviously the election was fraudulent. And then they can start on their next phase of their coup, which is to do recounts or Supreme Court or Congress or whatever they have in store for us. This is all part of this bigger play. And it's going to be messy. I mean, don't expect a result anytime after the 5th of November.
No. I mean, I think Arizona, Maricopa County has already just said, like, it could take them up to 10 days to count all the ballots. Yeah. So, yeah, we're not going to know.
Tell me about Gabe Sterling, because, you know, he was intrinsic in the counting of, or certainly in the system in, where was he? Pennsylvania?
Georgia.
Yeah, that's right, because he was Brad Raffensperger's kind of partner in crime.
He's Brad Raffensperger's chief operating officer.
That's exactly
right. So he was out giving a press conference today because, as you may recall, Marjorie Greene last week was claiming that votes were being flipped by Dominion machines, and she was receiving reports, is what she said, right?
And they always say that, don't they?
From Whitfield County, which is in her district in Northwest Georgia. So she claimed that, you know, a woman came or somebody came and voted, and then they printed out their ballot, and all the people that she voted for were wrong, right? And so the Dominion voting machine must have flipped her votes, right? So she says this on Alex Jones's show, which of course is going to create a huge firestorm of weirdos and nut jobs, and that's what happened, you know, is that everybody's like, oh my God, you know, the Dominion's flipping the votes again. Here we go again. And so what Sterling did is conduct an investigation over the last few days, track this person down. Turns out it's an elderly woman who was having some difficulty figuring out how to work the machine, and Sterling points out, like, look, you only really encounter these machines once every 4 years or once every 2 years. So, sometimes it can be a little tricky, and she needed some assistance. She got some assistance and she was fine. But obviously she told somebody about her experience. She wasn't complaining. But that person, whoever she told it to, decided to use it to start a conspiracy. And of course, once that conspiracy hit the ears of Marge Green, then it becomes, a whole big thing.
A firestorm. Let's take a look at Gabe Sterling putting this story back on track.
The crazier some of these claims can be. The specific claim we found out about in Whitfield County was one elderly voter who went to the poll manager and said, "This isn't who I meant to vote for." "Well, ma'am, why don't you come over here and we'll work with you?" So they went over there. She printed the ballot she wanted. She went and cast that ballot. A Democrat poll watcher came to her and said, "Ma'am, was this experience okay?" "Absolutely, this is a great experience." She told somebody that story, then they told somebody that story, and then a tweet went out or a Facebook post went up, and that's where this came from. The problem is one little piece of a human error, and this is the problem. There's going to be 190 million people interfacing with the system they deal with once every 2 to 4 years, with hundreds of thousands of volunteer-level human beings. There are going to be errors. What we can't allow people to do is undermine people's faith in the outcome of the election because of natural human frailty. That's why we have so many safeguards in place, so many reconciliations in place, so many audits in place, and so many machines getting tested before.
Good on Gabe, because, previously that guy wouldn't say boo to a goose, but now he recognizes that he has a very significant responsibility in ensuring that there isn't disinformation floating around surrounding these elections.
And he's a Republican, by the way.
Yeah,
I think they all know what's coming. All these guys like him, all around the country, all the supervisors. It's going to be mania, from the right. It's going to be, these people are going to be screaming about everything. They're going to say that in every county in America, someone's going to see somebody doing something suspicious that they're going to be reporting. And there's lawyers going to be filing complaints and everything. It's going to be absolute madness. And, we're seeing this with the Republicans right now, where they're trying to block overseas ballots, which are largely military. And the scheme that they've come up with for this is that it's tied to states. Like if you're military overseas, you just put on your ballot, like you request a ballot, like you just say, because if you're in the military and you're traveling, like I went in the military from Massachusetts, but I ended up by the end of my 4 years, I declared my residency as Florida because my family, while I was in the military, moved from Massachusetts to Florida. So what they're saying, so I was allowed to change my registration while I was in the military from Massachusetts to Florida, even though I hadn't actually lived in Florida yet. Okay. So this is what a lot of people in the military do. And what they're trying to do is block all these overseas ballots unless you first can show that you actually lived in that state for a period of time.
Yeah.
And a lot of these military people can't do that. And so, and not only that, there's not enough time for them to be able to show proof of that. So it's already been rejected by the courts, but the Republican Party is appealing it. So there's so many of these little lawsuits and things going on all over the place.
But this is more Truman Show.
Donald Trump.
Right? This is more Truman Show. This is stuff that is not real, that is wasting everybody's time, that is designed to create a narrative for Donald Trump. And actually it's just false. It's a fake environment with a fake story in the middle of it, all based on nothing, hearsay. It's such a shame that it's come to this.
It is. Yep.
Let's. I have a similar story that we need to update people on, and that is the late great Rudy Giuliani. He, as we know, has been ordered now to hand over his New York condo his personal property into receivership. This is to pay this defamation judgment. This is after he accused these two amazing women, mother and daughter, of ballot stuffing, and you know, they were poll workers. Finally, they're going to get paid out, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of funny little caveats to this, or interesting ones, I should say, which is, you know, Rudy, of course, tried to file bankruptcy to block all this and slow this down. And he ended up getting kicked out of bankruptcy court by the bankruptcy judge because it was obvious that he wasn't serious about trying to work his way through bankruptcy, and that he was just doing this to delay. So once he got kicked out of bankruptcy court, they immediately moved to seize his assets. And the judge has now done that. He's now ordered his assets to be, because Rudy then stalled because he wanted to sell his apartment in New York, which he was trying to sell for $6 million. And he was trying to sell that. And the problem is he was probably asking too much, and nobody wanted to buy Rudy's condo or his apartment. And so eventually the court and the plaintiffs just said, you know what, we're sick of this. We're tired of waiting for Rudy to sell this. We'll sell it at an auction. We'll take half, you know, whatever. Right. We don't care. So Rudy has actually had all of his stuff seized now. I mean, everything he has is his condo, his apartment. The only thing he has not been seized is two things, which is his condo in Florida, which he still has, he was allowed to pick one place that he was going to keep where he could reside. Yeah. So that's what he kept.
Surprise, surprise. That's what he chose.
He had some old when the Yankees won the World Series, I guess he was friends with Steinbrenner, the owner or whatever, and they gave him World Series rings. So those are worth something. So he claims that he gifted those to his son Andrew before this lawsuit was brought. And so Andrew, his son, has really filed a claim saying, no, these World Series rings are mine. My dad gave them to me before the lawsuit. So that still has to be litigated as well. But the bottom line here is, and the third thing, by the way, is Rudy has $2 million in unpaid legal fees.
That's what I was going to say. He owes Donald Trump, right?
And the court is now going to collect that from Donald Trump.
And they were trying to delay that.
Funny caveats.
He wanted to delay that till after the election, right? Because he didn't want to. We discussed that last week, so let's not go over old ground. But ultimately, this is a great fall from grace, isn't it, with Rudy Giuliani? And this is the point that I think this is the moral of this story, is that I think I've asked you before, but I'm very interested in how long he has been as corrupt as he clearly is. And, you know, was he like that when he was America's mayor? Probably, who knows? But it is a gigantic fall from grace, starting at the very least with the press conference that he gave at Four Seasons Total Landscaping, which will continue to be my favorite event ever in American political history.
Yeah, I mean, you think about where Rudy was the day before that press conference. Yeah, he was working at a prestigious firm in New York. He was paid, I think he was making like $2 million a year. Wow. He had a radio show with WABC. Yeah. He had his nice apartment, $6 million, whatever you want to say it's worth. He was a practicing lawyer, and, you know, he had it made. It's on Easy Street. And think of where he is since that press conference. He has disbarred, got stiffed on his legal fees, lost every case, got disbarred, got sued, is being criminally prosecuted, may die in prison, lost everything, lost all of his assets, all because he decided to go along with Donald Trump's scheme to try and stay in power. Rudy's just ruined. He's just a ruined individual. Yeah. And, you know, you think about where he was just 4 short years ago compared to now, and that's the moral of the story. Don't get in bed with Donald Trump.
Yeah. Dance with the devil. We have time for a couple more clips. I want to do this story about Donald Trump claiming that he helped Nelson Mandela. Just set this up for us, and then I'll play the video.
Yeah, this is completely outrageous. I mean, you know, Trump started this Trump Airlines, and he started it. He knew nothing. Again, this is classic Donald Trump. Right. In the 80s. He knew nothing at all. It's the same thing when he bought a football team. He knew nothing about football. Nothing. But he thought he was going to be the greatest, you know, owner in the history of the league and win all these championships. and he won nothing. And so he bought this airline thinking, well, I fly on airlines all the time, and I see problems. He could identify problems. So I'll just start an airline, and I'll just and I've posted the clip of his press conference when he was announcing the airline, which was like 1987, and he was, this is going to be the greatest airline ever. It's going to be like, he thought he was going to be Richard Branson.
He couldn't say why though, could he? All he did was he took these old planes and he just put gold taps in the bathrooms, and that was about it, right?
Yeah. So anyway, the company went completely bankrupt. So while it was in receivership, while the creditors had taken possession of the assets of the company and they're selling off assets, Nelson Mandela gets freed from prison in South Africa. And so he was looking for, he was doing a tour in 1990 of US cities, speaking tour. And there was a group that wanted to bring him over, but they didn't have a lot of money. And so here's this Trump airline that's gone out of business. The creditors are running it. So this was a way that they were able to rent and charter a plane to travel the country, doing it through that. And that's what they did. They spent $130,000 to rent this plane for, I don't know, a couple weeks to fly Mandela around the United States. So then many years later, this urban myth is developed that Donald Trump flew Mandela for free, like donated one of his planes out of the kindness of his heart to fly Mandela around the United States. And so he goes on this, he's desperately trying right now to win the black male vote. So he goes on this podcast of this right-wing guy who has a largely black audience, and he brings up this urban myth, like, Trump, a lot of people don't know the story about how you helped out Nelson Mandela. And of course, what does Trump do? He's sitting there. He knows that this is not true, that this is all bullshit, but he goes along with it. He says, oh yes, well, that's just the kind of guy I am. I love helping people. So it's just all bullshit, all made up, easily disproven, but they don't care. It just seems like the MAGA people don't care. He could just lie about everything.
Here he is.
Nelson Mandela and 80 of his constituents were trying to come to the United States.
Yeah.
The United States government wasn't helping him. No one was helping him. You chartered a 727 plane for their entire trip.
Yeah.
How is somebody, and it's crazy because you can talk about anything, and why is it hard for you to talk about the things you've done? It runs in your family. Your father helped build a synagogue. I mean, why do we not know those things?
It's something that I've never, I love doing it. I don't need praise for it. I don't, we all like a certain level of praise, but I've never, I just like helping people. I help a lot of people and I enjoy doing it, and I never talk about it. It's nice that you bring it up. I also think it's not a narrative that the press likes talking about, for me.
But I think it would help a lot of the American people who have been misled, I myself included. Now, listen, I'm voting for you now because of the man you are, not just because of the policies, because not every American will get the opportunity that I had to saw who you were backstage. And that's why I have this list. I mean, I have testimonials. We can't go through all because
I want to see them.
Now, this was, I had to dig deep.
I like that.
You donated $100,000 to raise dogs. You're not even a dog guy. Yeah. Explain that.
Well, that's Lara. So I have the wife of Eric, and she's a terrific person. She's actually now a very big, an important person in getting elected in the Republican Party. She comes from North Carolina. She loves the dogs. And I did that in her honor, actually. And, if you listen to her, boy, dogs are treated very badly. They're, some evil people having to do even with dogs. So I did that for my daughter-in-law, yeah, more so than me. I don't know that much about dogs, but I want to take care of them. And I had an opportunity. As president, you can do a lot of things. I did a lot.
Okay, I can't really take much more of that because
it's all lies.
It's all lies.
Like, none of that is true.
No,
he's just full of shit. And the host is just snowed. Like, he believes all this nonsense that's on the internet. And of course, Trump just goes right along with it. Oh yeah. And he says, I don't like praise.
Yeah.
And I don't like to talk about
it. Keep going. I mean, I also noticed, and hopefully you did too, that Trump really was looking very frail in that interview. He really was, like a shadow of his former self. And, this campaign, I mean, there was coverage of him being exhausted last week, in which he refuted, but of course was undoubtedly true, and cancelling interviews and appearances and various things. But, this campaign for a 78-year-old man who lives on a diet of Big Macs, this is taking its toll on him, isn't it?
There's no way he's doing this without the assistance of substances.
Yeah.
There's no way. So yeah, you're right. I mean, he looks haggard. He's sweating all the time. He looks a mess. He looks nothing like he did, even 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. He had a lot more, I was going to say lead in his pencil, but I think color in his cheeks is probably a better phrase. Let's finish, because we have to finish in just a moment, with this Arnold Palmer story. Maybe you can shed a little light on this. We'll just do this quickly just to wrap up. But this was quite interesting.
Yeah, again, his campaign had to be just mortified. This is not in the speech.
Yeah.
But so the rally was in Arnold Palmer's hometown, Latrobe, Pennsylvania, right? So he's naturally going to talk about Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer is, the most famous person ever to come from there. Trump's big into golf. So, but of course, normally Trump's move would be to share stories about himself and Arnold. The problem is he doesn't have any of those because Arnold Palmer hated Donald Trump. Arnold Palmer recounted to someone how he personally observed Donald Trump cheating on a golf course, because Trump used to play in all these pro-am events where sometimes Palmer would be there. And he saw him cheat, and he said, I made up my mind right then and then I could never trust this guy, because anybody who cheats at golf, they're gonna cheat you at anything. Because in golf, you have to enforce the rules against yourself. It's the only sport that's like that.
Yeah, you have to be trusted.
Which is not a good scenario for Donald Trump to enforce rules against himself. He's like the worst guy possible for that. So Trump doesn't have any stories of himself that he can relate where he's involved with Palmer. So he veers off into this bizarre, weird story about how someone told him about Palmer being in the shower, being extremely well endowed. And, when he was saying that, I just pictured his campaign people going, oh my God, because the entire narrative, the entire plan for that day, the messaging was gone, evaporated in 10 seconds. As soon as he started talking about Arnold Palmer's penis, the narrative was shot for the day that they had planned.
Well, let me play the clip. I give you the disgraced former president of the United States who's running for president again. Here it is.
Old man. This man was strong and tough. And I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God. That's unbelievable. I had to say it. We have women that are highly sophisticated here, but they used to look at Arnold as a bad, but he was.
Yeah, that's the limit. It's the pin for successfully passing the deep fat fryer French fries McDonald's situation and talking about a guy in the shower. That's really Donald Trump's limit. He's like a bad comic working terrible venues.
And making up a story about Nelson Mandela.
Right.
What a week, right? What a week.
Okay, listen, 13 days to go. Please register to vote if you haven't, and vote early if you're able to. Vote by mail if you can. Anything, but certainly on polling day, November 5th, make sure you're there and do not leave until you've cast your ballot. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. We'll come back next Wednesday and do it again. Download the podcast. That'll drop tonight wherever you get yours. And we'll uncover a few more MAGA Republicans in a week's time. Thanks a lot, Ron.
You got it. See you next week.